afternoon edition of Arirang News. Here are the stories making the headlines at this hour. Iran attacked Israel with more than 300 missiles and drones over the weekend. Though most of the strikes were intercepted, Israel has vowed retaliation. Iran has warned of even stronger attacks if there is retaliation from Israel or the U.S. Following the opposition party's landslide election victory, most of President Yoon's senior aides have resigned. The new appointments are taking longer than thought, as they were expected to be announced over the weekend. Former U.S. President Donald Trump will appear in court from this week to face charges related to allegations that he paid hush money to prevent a scandal ahead of the 2016 presidential election. This is the first time in American history that a former president will stand before a jury in court as a criminal defendant. Uncertainties grow in the Middle East region after Iran launched hundreds of drones and missiles from its territory toward Israel over a 5-hour period. Israel said it's considering all options to protect its own people, while Iran warned of even stronger attacks if retaliatory measures from Israel or the U.S. follows. Kim Bo-kyung starts us off.
It was an unprecedented attack, marking the first-ever direct overt attack launched at Israel from Iranian territory. Hundreds of drones, cruise, and ballistic missiles were launched at Israel by Iran on Saturday night, 12 days after an Israeli strike on the Iranian embassy complex in Syria. 99% of projectiles fired by Iran were reportedly intercepted by Israel and its partners, with U.S. President Joe Biden, during a call with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, describing the situation as a win, which demonstrated Israel's superior military capability. Biden also reportedly told his counterpart in Tel Aviv that the U.S. will not participate in any offensive action against Iran, though Washington's ironclad commitment to Israel's security against Iranian threats remains. With Washington seeking to contain the risk of a wider war in the Middle East region, a New York Times report said Biden had convinced Netanyahu not to greenlight an immediate retaliatory strike. However, White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said what happens next is up to Israel to decide.
It's going to be up to the Israelis to decide what the next step is here. I will just say this. President Biden, since the beginning of this conflict, has worked very hard to keep this from becoming a broader regional war.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog hinted that though Tel Aviv is not seeking war, there will be a decision that will make sure Israel protects and defends the country's people. That remark came amid reports that Israel is pondering over the scope and timing of a response, as well as a report in the Wall Street Journal that said the U.S. expects Israel to respond as early as April 15th. Iran's Armed Forces Chief of Staff warned that should Israel attack, the response would be decisively stronger and more resolute, and any backing from Washington would result in U.S. bases being targeted as well. Meanwhile, after Iran's attack, G7 leaders convened and unanimously condemned Iran's attack and called for restraint from all sides to prevent a regional war. A UN emergency session was also held upon a request from Israel, where UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for a de-escalation of violence and maximum restraint.
It's vital to avoid any action that could lead to major military confrontations on multiple fronts in the Middle East.
EU foreign ministers are also expected to hold a meeting on Tuesday to discuss the issue. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In response to Iran's attack on Israel, South Korea has strongly condemned the move, with President Yoon convening an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. Seoul's foreign ministry released a statement on Sunday afternoon, strongly condemning the large-scale attack on Israel by Iran and calling on all parties to exercise restraint to prevent further escalation. This came after President Yoon called an emergency meeting of senior officials to discuss the potential security and economic impact across the world. He called on the government to thoroughly review risk factors and prepare measures for the safety of Korean citizens, businesses, and diplomatic missions located in Israel and the Middle East. Yoon also requested authorities to closely monitor and analyze global oil prices, the energy market, and supply chains. South Korea's fuel tax cut will be extended through June as fears grow over a wider regional conflict in the Middle East. Our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
The South Korean government has decided to extend fuel tax cuts through June as growing tensions in the Middle East are expected to lead to soaring global oil prices. That's according to the opening remarks made by Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok during an emergency economic meeting on Monday.
Depending on how the situation continues to develop, risks surrounding energy and supply chains and the volatility in the finance market may grow. As such, the government will remain vigilant and establish a pan-governmental emergency response system to respond accordingly.
The government's announcement means that the 25% cut in fuel tax has been extended 2 more months after last being extended through April and February. This cut, which has been in place since January 1st, means fuel tax is currently 615 won, or roughly 44 US cents per liter, rather than roughly 59 cents per liter. This means consumers can save roughly $18 a month on fuel. The decision comes as Iran launched hundreds of drones and missiles toward Israel on Saturday night, 12 days after an Israeli strike on the Iranian embassy complex in Syria. While most of the strikes were reportedly intercepted by Israel and its partners, it has increased fears over a broader war. The government will also maintain the 37% fuel tax cut on diesel and liquefied petroleum gas for 2 more months. With this, the tax on diesel stands at 27 cents and LPG at 9 cents. The finance minister also said that pan-governmental efforts will be made to monitor both domestic and global economic trends in real time to prepare for a range of possible scenarios. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
On the local front, President Yoon Suk-yeol is preparing to replace his key aides and the Prime Minister after they resigned following the Liberal main opposition's landslide victory in the general election last week. The new appointments are taking longer than thought, as they were expected to be announced over the weekend. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young has the report.
President Yoon Suk-yeol is taking longer than expected to name a new Chief of Staff and Prime Minister, as his administration cautiously mulls its next steps after the general election last week handed the opposition a majority in Parliament. Key officials, including the Chiefs of Staff, Senior Secretaries and the Prime Minister, offered to resign after that disastrous outcome for the ruling party. Yoon's officials have hinted that even Monday could be too early to announce the new appointments, saying they need at least a minimum amount of time to screen the candidates. This is perhaps to avoid any potential backlash from the opposition or public criticism that could arise from rushing the process. Of course, there is no set deadline, but it's unlikely to take too long, as the Yoon administration has committed to self-reformation, with a major overhaul of senior figures likely to become the first step. In contrast with Yoon's previous appointments, the incoming Chief of Staff is likely to be a political heavyweight who can skillfully work with an opposition-held parliament and make an astute response to major domestic issues and crises. The rumoured candidates are Transport Minister Won Il-yong, former opposition leader and National Unity Committee Chair Kim Han-gil, lawmaker Jang Jae-won and Interior Minister Lee Sang-min. More high-ranking staff, including senior secretaries for press, society and political affairs, are expected to be replaced. But the Chief of Staff for Policy and senior aides for Economy and Science may retain their positions for continuity. Appointing a new PM could take longer as it requires parliamentary approval. The likely candidates include Kim Han-gil once again, as well as former Unification Minister Kwon Yong-se and ruling party lawmaker Chu Ho-young, who were re-elected for their 5th and 6th terms respectively, to fully reform the management of state affairs as the president pledged last week. His office is considering a major cabinet reshuffle and a restructuring of the presidential office to make it more receptive to public opinion. This could involve resurrecting the position of a senior secretary for civil affairs or creating a new division to facilitate better engagement with Parliament and the public. To set the tone for the administration's way forward over the next 3 years, Yoon is planning to convey his position on the general election sometime this week, possibly through a televised address to the nation, a cabinet meeting speech, or a press conference. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the National Assembly is getting prepared to welcome new lawmakers-elect come May. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo explains what awaits the new members of the legislature in the coming months.
A little less than 50 days remain until the official launch of the 22nd National Assembly of South Korea. But the work doesn't start then. Since well before the April 10th election day, the Assembly's administrative offices have been busy at work preparing to welcome in a new batch of representatives. Beginning in March, separate offices joined together to launch a welcoming committee. 2 days before the voting day, they opened up a comprehensive center to support new lawmakers. Once the 300 new members of parliament were decided, the center began processing lawmaker registrations, providing guidance that will help those newly elected during the next 4 years. May 30th is the official launch date of the new assembly. This is when the preparation for the first extraordinary session begins. The first plenary session, a gathering of the full chamber, is scheduled for June 5th. If the meeting convenes as scheduled, the assembly will vote in a speaker and 2 deputy speakers to lead them through the first half of their 4-year term. All members will be sworn in and the new speaker will give an opening speech. The president may also address the chamber. On June 7th, members will be appointed to respective standing committees based on their expertise and knowledge. These dates are outlined by the National Assembly Act. But many previous assemblies have pushed back their schedules due to clashes in opinions between the respective camps, especially as they appoint new committee leaders. This precedent should not give an excuse for the 22nd National Assembly to follow in their predecessors' footsteps, however, as pending issues affecting society do not wait. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
Korea's ICT exports surged by 90% year-on-year in March, reaching nearly $19 billion, driven by a recovery in the semiconductor sector. Shin Se-byuk with the details.
Semiconductor exports have sustained double-digit growth for the 5th consecutive month, driving South Korea's tech sector forward. Data released by the Trade Ministry on Monday shows that ICT exports in March rose 19.4% on year to nearly $18.8 billion. This marked the 5th consecutive month of year-on-year increases for the nation's tech exports overall and the 3rd straight month of double-digit growth. According to the ministry, chips led the charge, with exports reaching $11.7 billion for an increase of 34% on year. The growth in the artificial intelligence market has significantly boosted demand for semiconductors. Recovering demand for IT devices such as mobile phones and PCs has also propelled chip exports to their highest level since June 2022, when they hit $12.5 billion. Other sectors also saw robust growth, indicating a strong recovery in overall ICT exports. Shipments of displays climbed more than 13% on year as both OLED and LCD panel exports were up. Computer exports also recorded a 20% year-on-year increase, marking 3 consecutive months of growth. But the mobile sector as a whole saw its exports tumble by 7% compared to the previous year to $220 million due to a weakened global demand for mobile phone parts. By country, China remains the largest market for exports, with $8.4 billion worth of shipments in March, up 32.5% from last year, and marking year-on-year growth for the 5th consecutive month. Vietnam and the United States followed with exports of $3 billion and $2.3 billion, respectively. Meanwhile, ICT imports for March stood at $11.7 billion, leading to a trade surplus of just over $7 billion. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met with China's 3rd highest-ranking official, Zhao Leji, on Saturday and discussed boosting Pyongyang-Beijing ties. Kim and Zhao also had lunch together, according to the regime's official newspaper, Rodong-sinmun, which came as since Thursday, and the meeting with Kim came on the last day of the visit. Kim also had lunch with Zhao, according to the regime's official newspaper, Rodong-sinmun, on Sunday. South Korea's unification ministry said on Monday that Pyongyang and Beijing are trying to show their close relationship through this visit. The government added that any country, when interacting with North Korea, must abide by the UN Security Council resolutions. Former U.S. President Donald Trump will appear in court starting this week on charges related to allegations that he paid hush money to prevent a scandal ahead of the 2016 presidential election. This marks the first time in American history that a former president will stand before a jury in court as a criminal defendant, with the outcome of the trial expected to have a significant impact on the direction of the presidential election in November. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Donald Trump will become the first former U.S. president to ever stand before a criminal trial, with his lawyers, prosecutors, and Justice Juan Merchan set to pick jurors in a New York courtroom on Monday to hear evidence on charges related to allegations that he paid hush money to prevent a sex scandal ahead of the 2016 presidential election. Trump has been indicted on 34 felony counts for falsifying company records linked to money allegedly paid through his lawyer Michael Cohen to prevent the disclosure of his past sexual relationship with a former adult film star, Stormy Daniels, just before the 2016 presidential election. While Trump faces a total of 4 criminal trials, this is the only criminal case scheduled for trial before the November presidential election. Trump has strongly denied the allegations of manipulating his company's accounting figures and that he had a sexual relationship with Daniels. He has claimed that the allegations are politically motivated by the Democrats. As the defendant in the criminal case, Trump must appear in court throughout the trial scheduled 4 days a week, excluding Wednesdays for about 6 to 8 weeks. So much time spent in court could be a crucial setback for the former president at a time when he should be focusing on his election campaign. While Trump's team of lawyers have made an all-out effort to postpone the trial until after the presidential election, it was not accepted by the court. Each of his 34 indictments carries the possibility of a 4-year prison term, with Trump certain to appeal any guilty verdict and sentence. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Since last year, April 12th has been designated as Library Day, followed by a week-long celebration to raise awareness and appreciation for books in libraries nationwide. Korean literature has been drawing attention on the global stage lately, with some even calling it the K-book phenomenon. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin looks into what sets Korean books apart.
2024 has so far been a great year for Korean books. Last month, Kim Hae-sun became the first Korean author to win the U.S. National Book Critics Circle Award. Lee Gumi achieved another first for Korea by being shortlisted for the prestigious Hans Christian Andersen Award, while 3 Korean picture books won trophies at the Bologna Ragazzi Award. Novelist Hwang Seok-young's Mater 210 has also been shortlisted for the 2024 International Booker Prize. This success stems from Korea's decades-long efforts to export its literary works.
Since the 2000s, we've seen a surge in Korean literature exports, especially after Arthur Hangang's 2016 Man Booker International Prize win. The evidence is domestic publishers establishing dedicated departments dealing with copyright and intellectual rights of Korean authors, an increase in contracts with major overseas publishers, and minimum guarantees for Korean authors soaring from 4 to 6 digits.
The numbers don't lie. Translation requests for Korean literature to the Literature Translation Institute of Korea jumped more than 20-fold in 2023 compared to 2014. What makes Korean literature appealing is the blend of distinctive, yet relatable themes.
Korean literature offers a unique perspective shaped by Korea's historical, political, and societal contexts, such as it being a divided country, which attracts international readers eager to explore something new.
Many readers often try out Korean literature through their love of Korean dramas and films. But what attracts them is how authors incorporate relatable themes like human rights, environmental issues, and challenges facing the younger generation into their unique storytelling.
But captivating themes aren't enough. Skillful translation is a must to captivate international readers.
A great translation preserves the emotional depth of the original by understanding both the author's narrative and the nuances of the target language and culture.
That's why the Literature Translation Institute of Korea has been running its Translation Academy since 2008. Notable graduates include Sora Kim Russell and Youngjae Josephine Pae, the translators of Mater 210, as well as Anton Hall, who translated Jung Bora's Booker Prize-nominated work, Cursed Bunny. Looking ahead, as the majority of translated Korean works are currently commercial fiction, introducing long-standing classics could ignite even more curiosity and interest in Korean literature. 송유진, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. In Australia, 6 people were killed and at least 12 injured in a stabbing attack at a mall in Sydney on Saturday. The attacker was fatally shot by a police officer at the scene. At a press conference on Sunday, the New South Wales police announced that 40-year-old Joel Cauchi was responsible for the attack at a busy Sydney shopping centre not far from the world-famous Bondi Beach. 5 females and 1 male, all aged between 20 and 50, were killed in the attack at the Westfield shopping centre in Bondi Junction. 12 others are in hospital. New South Wales Police Commissioner Anthony Cook said that the attack was not terrorism-related, but rather related to the mental health of the individual involved. In Niger, hundreds took to the streets over the weekend to demand the departure of US troops from the country. This followed a strategic shift by Niger's ruling junta, which ended its military accord with previous Western allies such as the US and France, and instead welcomed Russian military guidance. Demonstrators called for the departure of around 1,000 military US personnel from 2 bases in Niger. They held handwritten signs with messages such as "God Curse USA." Until Niger's coup d'etat in July last year, it was a key security partner of France and the US, but the new junta government has joined the likes of Mali and Burkina Faso to end military deals with Western allies, leave the economic community of West African states, and foster closer relations with Moscow. Russian military instructors and equipment were seen arriving in Niger on Wednesday, dictating the junta's openness for closer cooperation with Russia. In China, 130 Chinese nationals suspected of crimes related to gambling and fraud were repatriated from Cambodia on Saturday to face trial. The arrival of the suspects in Wuhan follows enhanced cooperation between Cambodian and Chinese police to combat cross-border gambling and telecom scams. Over 100 Chinese suspects were captured in a recent operation, along with an inventory of digital equipment. Chinese police say another batch of suspects will be repatriated later on. Bayer Leverkusen have won their first ever Bundesliga title. Leverkusen were confirmed as champions of Germany's top football league, the Bundesliga, after a 5-0 win over Werder Bremen on Sunday. Striker Victor Boniface and midfielder Granit Xhaka each scored 1, while 20-year-old midfielder Florian Wirtz scored a hat-trick. Xabi Alonso's undefeated team have won the title with 5 games to spare, breaking an 11-year stranglehold on the league by Bayern Munich. Bayer Leverkusen have now gone 29 matches without defeat this season, setting a new league record. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It felt like we jumped right into the beach season over the weekend with record-breaking April warmth in the capital. But today's rain will put the brakes on abnormally warm afternoon temperatures, not going up much from today's morning lows. Much anticipated rain should gradually expand to the rest of the country to ease the dryness in the air. The south coast and mountainous regions on Jeju could see more than 80 millimeters of heavy showers. The rest of the country will see 5 to 60 millimeters of rainfall. This afternoon, highs will be 5 to 10 degrees lower than yesterday, hovering around 20 degrees Celsius in most parts of the country. Seoul sees a high of 19 degrees, Jeju topping out at 22 degrees, with a strong wind advisory also issued on the island as well as the west coast. After the rain subsides tomorrow morning, we'll have typical spring weather with a threat of yellow dust sweeping into the country. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for you at this hour. We'll bring you more updates at the same time tomorrow.